What is the secret behind Pokemon's success? It's a question that people have been asking for almost as long as the franchise has been around, and there are plenty of good answers to it. Pokemon combined the immense marketability of Sanrio-style kawaii character designs with the faux companionship of virtual pets and the adventure fantasy offered by shonen anime and JRPGs to create a nigh irresistible cocktail of kid-friendly concepts. But that only explains how Pokemon found its initial success, how it became the hot toy of Christmas 1999, as newscasters at the time were so eager to put it. And as we know now, that Christmas was just the beginning. Despite prognostications of doom from boomers who thought it was just another fad, Pokemon stuck around for every Christmas thereafter, allowing it, over the 20 years and change that followed, to become the most profitable media thing ever, with a near $10 billion lead on Hello Kitty, a franchise nearly twice its age. Mainline Pokemon games have been incredibly consistent system sellers for every Nintendo handheld, helping to secure their unrivaled dominance of the portable game console market for decades. At $3 billion of profit and counting, Pokemon Go is one of the biggest players in the mobile gaming market as well, and the newest entries in the franchise, Sword and Shield, despite being embroiled in messy controversies among hardcore fans, have reportedly become the Switch's fastest-selling titles to date. It's not just Pokemon's meteoric rise to the top of global pop culture that's remarkable, but the fact that it managed to stay there. Or, to be more accurate, that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company managed to keep it there by essentially recreating the lightning-in-a-bottle circumstances that made it such an unprecedented success when it first came to North America. And the way that they've done that is by keeping a very tight schedule. That might seem like a boring answer, but only if you don't realize the scope of that schedule. See, it's a bit of a fib to say that Pokemon was the hottest toy of Christmas 1999, because it wasn't just the one toy. That holiday season was absolutely dominated by Pokemon merchandise of all kinds. Toys, trading cards, video games, video cassettes, comics, clothing, cereal, stationery, you name a product, there was a Pikachu on it, and it was selling like hotcakes. Pokémon was the biggest TV show, toy line, gaming franchise, trading card game, and kids apparel brand in the world all at once. And that's no coincidence. Its success in every one of those fields fueled growth in all of the others. The show sold the games and the clothes and the toys, and seeing those on the schoolyard made more kids aware of the show's existence. That feedback loop just did what feedback loops do until the market was saturated and then some. Pokémon was only able to do that, though, because in the 2 years between its initial release in Japan and its explosive launch in the West, licensors had plenty of time to make all of those products. So what was originally a steady stream of merchandise and media hit Western shores as one all-encompassing wave. Nintendo, Creatures Inc., and Game Freak joined forces to create the Pokemon Company shortly thereafter. Its job? To handle licensing requests and manage the overall Pokemon brand, while its creators focused on making the games. In their role coordinating between the developers at Game Freak, the animators at Oriental Light and Magic, the card game designers at Media Factory, various book publishers, and countless toy and merch manufacturers besides, the Pokemon Company was uniquely stationed to see the full picture of how that multimedia brand synergy helped Red and Blue explode in the US, and they were in a perfect position to facilitate a repeat performance. It did take them a while to really hit their stride. Pokemon Gold and Silver were delayed, which meant that OLM suddenly had to fill 39 episodes worth of airtime with a detour through the Orange Islands, and the Johto arc was peppered with filler to account for the delay of Ruby and Sapphire, and then Diamond and Pearl were delayed too, but they've gotten a lot better at coordinating and planning with practice. Nowadays, every new Pokemon game releases on schedule alongside a new storyline in the anime, new booster sets in the card game, and a mountain of new toys, clothes, and accessories. Oh, and I guess that live-action feature films are probably going to be part of that cycle from here on out as well, likely filling the same role that the animated Pokemon films do in Japan of keeping the brand relevant between tentpole game releases. Every one of those events requires cooperation and coordination between a large number of massive companies, all of which are themselves comprised of thousands of people spread across hundreds of disciplines and specialties who all need to work together in order to ship any of these products on time, let alone all of them at the same time. Speaking as someone who sometimes can't even manage to wrangle himself and one editor to get a 15-minute YouTube video out on a weekly schedule, I've got to say that impresses the shit out of me. But this business model has its downsides, and those have been felt pretty strongly by some of the franchise's most dedicated followers recently. I think Pokemon Sword and Shield are fine games, personally. They're certainly good enough to scratch my itch for more Pokemon, but what they're not is consistently great. In a lot of areas, it's obvious that Game Freak had to make compromises to get them out on time. There's no longer a flying animation, for instance. The game just uses bog-standard fade-to-black fast travel, and the ride Pokemon from Sun and Moon are gone entirely, replaced with a kind of bland all-purpose Rotom bike that uses the same janky mechanical character animation on both land and water. Many of the game's new features, like camping and the wild area, show a lot of potential, but they're a bit undercooked. The idea of just chilling with your Pokemon Nintendog style in order to bond with them is really cool on paper, but in practice, all you can really do is talk to them, play fetch, dangle a cat toy in their faces, or watch them interact with each other in a few very basic ways. It is fun, but it feels like there should be more to it. More toys, more unique interactions based on Pokemon personalities, that sort of thing. It feels like this was supposed to be bigger than it is. And then, of course, there's the Pokédex issue. Of the 809 Pokemon that existed in past generations, only 320 can be found in the Galar region, plus 80 new ones. And unlike previous games, you can't import any of your old Pokemon that aren't part of that list. That makes this the smallest Pokemon game by head count since Ruby and Sapphire. And while Sword and Shield sales figures show that most people don't really care, the people who do care a lot. I would argue maybe too much. A lot of those people have been hurling insults and epithets at the game's developers, making life hell for their social media teams, and generally just acting like big ding-dongs. But ding-donginess aside, I can also see where they're coming from. I mean, Pokemon is the second biggest video game series on Earth. You'd think that its latest main entry would be more than just, good enough to make most people happy. Normally, this is where I'd wave my game design diploma around saying, "You fools have no idea what game development is really like," but that ground's already been thoroughly covered by animators and designers who know it a lot better than I do. You've already heard, probably more than once, that modeling and animating the entire Pokédex is a massive task that's only made more complicated by the fact that Game Freak has to update their entire engine for each new Nintendo handheld. You've also been told that that process is a lot more complicated than just copying and pasting assets from game to game, that a lot of stuff in game development just goes wrong for no reason, and that dealing with all of that doesn't leave much time to add new features like seeing Pokemon wandering out in the wild. And I can add some things to those arguments, like pointing out that a lot of time also clearly went into refining the art direction of the Galar region so that it looks like a painting of the English countryside come to life and not a generic plasticky CGI mess like the last two home console Pokemon RPGs, which explains why the tree textures look so muddy and why the HD textures that modders replace them with look even worse and don't fit the game at all, but any technical point that I make will just be a riff on the same basic argument, that game development is more complicated and more difficult than most people realize. And those of you still demanding that Game Freak #BringBackNationalDex already have a canned answer to that argument. The Pokemon Company just needs to stop being greedy and give them more time to make the games. It's really not that simple, though. Nintendo can justify delaying a new Mario or Zelda until it's polished to a mirror sheen because those games are standalone products designed to sell themselves and the systems they're on first and foremost. But every new Pokemon game is also the linchpin of an entire multi-million-dollar multimedia marketing machine. There are many companies whose annual business plans depend on Game Freak's ability to get games out the door on time and on a regular basis. To #give Game Freak more time when fans began demanding it this year would have meant altering years of pre-production work on the Sword and Shield anime and likely sending Ash on another cruise through the Orange Islands while the OLM team crunched to compensate. It would also have meant delaying the sale of toys and merch that were already being produced and distributed, hurting the manufacturers and leaving stores scrambling to stock their shelves with something else until the new street dates hit, probably after Christmas. It would have meant reworking the release schedule for the Pokemon TCG over the next year and rebalancing every new set to make up for the missing Sword and Shield cards, and also rewriting the next chapters of the impressively still ongoing Pokemon Adventures manga. And, of course, Millions upon millions of marketing dollars would have to be spent to make sure all of the fans know the new release dates for all of those different things. A delay in the release of a new Pokemon game is a major economic event whose impact would ripple through just about every industry you can imagine, likely wiping out a good number of jobs in the process. So, while naked greed is almost certainly a motivating factor in the Pokemon Company's ongoing efforts to sustain and grow the most profitable brand in existence, they also have a significant responsibility to their own employees and everyone they're working with to not let that happen. There is a canned counterargument to that, too. Why not just create more jobs? Use some of them billions of dollars to hire more artists and programmers and whatever else you need to do more work in the same time frame. Unfortunately, again, it's not that simple. While on paper, hiring more people would give Game Freak more raw man-hours to work with, people are a lot more complicated than numbers on a spreadsheet, and it would make it a lot harder to use that time efficiently. Say in their rush to bring in new artists, Game Freak accidentally ends up hiring a few assholes who put everyone around them on edge. That can hurt the entire company's productivity. If a miscommunication between the old and new staff means that a bunch of new assets won't work in the game, that can hurt the entire company's productivity. If a lot of skilled artists, animators, and coders have to spend their time training newbies on proprietary tools instead of making usable assets themselves, that can, well, you get the idea. Finding the right people for a job and training them to do it is hard, time-consuming work, and no matter how much money you have to throw at the problem, if you don't do that work right, it will be wasted. Anyone who's run a business can tell you how easy it is to end up spending more to get less done. Mass hirings are a proportionately massive gamble, and while the Pokemon Company has money to burn, we've already gone over what happens if that gamble results in Game Freak not being able to finish the game on time. To recap, Game Freak didn't have enough time to make the game as they envisioned it with every feature they want. They couldn't delay it without hurting their business partners. Hiring a bunch of new people late in production would increase the risk of the delay happening, and just to quash the dumbest counterargument, crunching to get more things done would have made the employees they already had more likely to quit, in addition to being a generally shitty thing to do. So what is the answer to this problem? To reduce the scope of Game Freak's vision until the team they had could make it in the time they had. That meant not putting all the Pokemon in Pokemon. And since there's so many of the little critters now, and Game Freak will always have to keep making more of them to fuel the merch machine, endlessly increasing the scope of the Pokedex as a feature in games that have to come out every 3 years no matter what, it kind of makes a lot of sense to preemptively implement that solution into all of their future development cycles. That way, they're permanently buying themselves more time to acclimate to whatever new hardware Nintendo wants them to sell next, and to work on features that might expand the core experience of Pokemon, instead of just making the same streamlined Game Boy RPG every 3 years, only prettier and with more dudes in it. While I quite like that RPG, personally, and I'm very happy with the new dudes like Wooloo and Cramorant and Toxtricity, seeing how much fun Yazzy's been having with just the camping feature, even in its very basic form, I'm inclined to believe that that's a good call. There are a lot of ways these games could be made more immersive and engaging to better make good on that fantasy of living in the Pokemon world and forging a bond with your companion creatures. And if the trade-off for exploring those avenues is a smaller Pokedex, I'll take it. I say none of this to make the case that you shouldn't want more from the games that you spend your money on, but for a lot of reasons, we can't always get everything we want. And while sometimes those reasons are the bad people were lazy and/or greedy, mostly, as seems to be the case here, they're the result of limitations imposed by the systems that we've built to make stuff that most of us mostly want. And the designs of those systems are in turn influenced by the bigger systems that we use to organize our whole damn world. For example, under our current system, capitalism, money is the sole metric by which the success of large artistic endeavors like Pokemon can be judged, as well as the sole mechanism that allows more such endeavors to be undertaken. And as long as the continued existence of the Pokemon Company and all of their partners relies on satisfying those metrics, Game Freak will likely never be given the time to make Pokemon as good as it can be. But, for what it's worth, I think it's pretty good right now, all things considered. And that goodness isn't just limited to the games. Between the anime, the plushies, the cards, and the comics, Pokemon has brought a lot of joy into my life and Yazzy's over the years, and I know it's done the same for many of you, along with a lot of kids out there who are not the target audience for this video, YouTube. And I don't know, man, I sure would love it if we could just end capitalism to make Pokemon better, but there's a lot of logistical hurdles there, it'll probably take a while, and in the meantime, while we should definitely voice our displeasure with the state of things in a respectful manner that doesn't attack people who have no power to change things, I think it also makes sense to try to be happy with what Game Freak can give us, which isn't as hard as it sounds. Just stare at this Wooloo for a couple of seconds, and there, you did it. I'm Geoff Thew, professional shitbag, signing out from my mother's basement.